Why most men misunderstand love. Let's begin with a hard truth. Most men have been lied to about what makes a woman fall in love. We're told it's about the grand gestures, the flowers, the candlelit dinners, the perfectly timed compliments. We grow up watching movies where the guy wins her heart by chasing her down in the rain or giving a dramatic speech in front of a crowd. But in real life, it doesn't work like that, does it? You give everything. You're kind. You're always available. You say all the right things, and yet something still feels off. She doesn't seem fully drawn in. You're doing everything right. And still, she drifts away. Why? Because love, real love, is not logical. It's not something you convince someone into. It's not born from safety or perfection. It's born from a feeling, a spark she can't control. And here's the twist. It doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from your presence, a man who is grounded, calm, silent when others rush to explain. A man who doesn't need her attention to validate who he is. That's who she feels pulled toward. Not the one chasing, not the one texting paragraphs, not the one constantly proving he's good enough, but the one who knows he is and has nothing to prove. Think about it. When was the last time you were around someone who didn't chase your approval, and you found yourself wondering about them? That's the paradox of attraction. She falls for the one who doesn't need her to fall. And this is where most men get it wrong. They believe love is something you earn by effort. But effort, when it comes from insecurity, feels like pressure, and pressure repels. Real love begins in the unknown. In curiosity, in that magnetic pull she can't explain. It's emotional, primal, even spiritual. And it's triggered not by your logic, but by your energy. Your silence speaks louder than any carefully crafted sentence. Your stillness, when other men would rush in with excuses or persuasion, that is what separates you. It's your restraint, not your reaction, that draws her in. This isn't about playing games. It's not about manipulation. It's about mastery. Self-mastery, Stoic mastery. Because when you don't chase, when you don't explain, when you don't need, you show her that your peace doesn't depend on her reaction. That's rare. That's powerful. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." In the realm of relationships, nothing could be more true. The man who is still inside, who doesn't flinch at rejection, who doesn't beg for understanding, that man becomes unforgettable because he offers what most people can't: freedom. The freedom for her to feel, to choose, to wonder. And wonder is where love begins. Not in knowing, not in guarantees, but in that quiet space of, what is it about him? So if you've ever found yourself trying too hard, explaining too much, or feeling exhausted from chasing someone's love, pause. Ask yourself, am I showing up with pressure or presence? Am I speaking from insecurity, or letting silence say what I truly stand for? Am I living with self-mastery, or performing to earn affection? Because here's the truth most men miss. She doesn't want your perfection. She wants to feel something real, and what's real can only come from a man who's already whole within himself. When you master that, she won't forget you. Part 1. The inner shift that sparks love. Let's get something straight. She doesn't fall in love with the man who worships her. She falls in love with the man who doesn't need her. Now that might sound cold at first, but stay with me, because this is not about indifference. It's about power. The kind of inner power that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't shrink to please. Most men have been conditioned to believe that love is about doing more compliments, more gifts, more attention. They try to win her by making her their everything. But ironically, that's exactly what drives her away. Because the moment she becomes your entire world, you stop being yourself. And a man who loses himself in the name of love loses her too. Let's dig deeper. A woman doesn't want to be the center of your universe. She wants to feel the gravitational pull of a man who already has a universe of his own. Let me say that again. She wants to be drawn into your world, not become the reason for it. When you are a man on a mission, when your life has purpose, direction, discipline, that's when she's drawn in. Not by your words, but by your energy. Not by your compliments, but by your clarity. It's the difference between orbit and obsession. Neediness says, "Please choose me. I don't know who I am without you." But presence says, "You're welcome in my life. But I was whole long before you came." Which one do you think stirs deeper desire? There's something magnetic about a man who stands tall on his own foundation, who doesn't waver when she tests him, who doesn't collapse emotionally just because she pulls away. It's not arrogance, it's emotional independence, it's self-respect. It's what the Stoics call living in accordance with nature. And nature doesn't cling, it flows. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not her approval, not her texts, not how much attention you get." When you stop chasing validation from women, you become deeply attractive. Why? Because she can feel that your peace doesn't depend on her, and that makes her curious. It makes her wonder, why isn't he like the others? Think of the men women obsess over. They're not the loudest, they're not the most available. They're the ones who carry stillness in a world full of noise, who don't try to be liked because they're too focused on being aligned. She may not understand it logically, but emotionally she feels it. And that's where love is born. From the emotional pull of someone who's unshaken, unhurried, unapologetically rooted in who he is. So let me ask you, are you the man who waits by the phone, or the one who forgets to check it because he's building something bigger? Are you the man who crumbles at a cold text, or the one who knows his worth regardless of how she responds? Are you needing her to choose you, or inviting her into a life she'd be a fool to ignore? Because the shift begins within you. When you stop putting her on a pedestal, she starts to see you through new eyes. Not as a project to fix, not as a fan to adore her, but as a force she can't ignore. And that force doesn't come from games or tricks. It comes from stillness, from mission, from detachment, not the kind that pushes love away, but the kind that says, "Whether you stay or go, I remain me." That's Stoicism in its highest form, emotional sovereignty. Because when you no longer need her to love you, you create the space where real love can grow. Part 2. Emotional tension pulls her in. Let me tell you something most people won't. Love doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in tension. I know. We're taught to believe the opposite. That if we make her feel constantly secure, available, and showered in praise, she'll fall deeper in love. But here's the truth. Too much comfort too soon kills the spark. It's not comfort that ignites passion. It's not constant agreement that builds chemistry. It's emotional tension, that unpredictable magnetic energy that keeps her wondering, what's going on in his mind? The moment you become too predictable, too available, too known, is the moment the mystery dies. And with it, so does attraction. This is where many men lose the woman they were trying to win. They open up too much, too fast. They explain every thought, share every emotion, and give her their full attention at all hours of the day. It feels generous, loving, honest. But to her, it feels like pressure. It feels like need. and neediness never sparks passion. It drains it. Let's step back for a moment and think biologically. In psychology, there's a concept called intermittent reinforcement. It's one of the strongest drivers of attachment. It's the reason people get hooked on slot machines. Not because they win all the time, but because they don't. The unpredictability creates excitement. The uncertainty keeps them engaged. Now, apply that to relationships. When you're too consistent with validation, when she can predict exactly when you'll text, how you'll respond, how often you'll compliment her, it removes the emotional charge. But when there's a sense of mystery, a slight unpredictability in how and when you express affection, it activates something deeper. It stirs curiosity. It builds suspense, and it pulls her in. This doesn't mean you play games or manipulate. That's not what I'm saying. It means you allow space. You hold back sometimes. You give her the gift of not knowing everything right away, because mystery, when rooted in confidence, becomes magnetic. Think about it. Who leaves a deeper impression? The man who texts her 10 times a day, or the one who disappears for a while and returns with depth, purpose, and power? Who stirs more emotion? The one who constantly reassures her, or the one who, through calm silence, invites her to feel instead of just hear? Now listen carefully. This isn't about being emotionally cold. It's about being emotionally composed. That's the Stoic way. A Stoic doesn't over-explain. He doesn't reveal everything just to relieve someone else's insecurity. He allows people to experience his presence as a gift, not a need. As Epictetus taught, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Sometimes, silence is the answer. Sometimes, a look, a pause, a little distance speaks louder than 1,000 affirmations. And that silence, that pause, that unpredictability, it creates tension. The kind of tension that doesn't feel like stress, but like depth. The kind of tension that builds desire instead of crushing it. Let me give you an example. Imagine 2 men. One tells her every morning that she's beautiful, texts her constantly throughout the day, and always says yes to every plan. The other? He's kind, he's attentive. But he's not always available. He disappears into his work, into his growth, into his own world. And when he returns, he shows affection without explanation. Guess which one keeps her up at night? It's not cruelty, it's not aloofness. It's the unknown that grips her, because the mind cannot desire what it already fully understands. So if you've been oversharing, if you've been constantly checking in, over-explaining your emotions, or trying to prove your love through endless validation, pull back. Not out of spite, but out of strength. Let her feel you, not just hear you. Let her miss you, not manage you. Let her wonder about you, not get tired of you. That's not playing hard to get. That's being a man who gets himself first. A man who knows that love thrives in emotional rhythm, not in emotional noise. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Are you creating comfort that dulls attraction, or tension that deepens it? Because the man who learns to master emotional tension, calmly, quietly, without games, becomes unforgettable. Not because he begged to be remembered, but because he created space for her to feel something she couldn't explain. And that's where love begins. Part 3. Mystery triggers obsession. Let's talk about obsession. Not the unhealthy kind, but the magnetic pull, the kind of obsession that lives in her mind long after you leave the room. And it doesn't come from being overly available. It comes from being slightly unknown. The biggest mistake men make after they gain a woman's attention is they hand over their entire soul on a silver platter. every thought, every feeling, every story from childhood to last week. Why? Because they believe the more she knows, the more she'll love. But in reality, the more she knows too soon, the faster the mystery dies. And without mystery, desire doesn't grow. It shrinks. Because love isn't logic, it's emotional chemistry, and chemistry needs space. Let me explain something called the Zeigarnik effect. It's a psychological principle that shows people remember unfinished experiences more than completed ones. It's why cliffhangers keep us binge-watching TV shows at 2 a.m. It's why you remember the text conversation that ended abruptly more than the one that went on for hours and faded away. The human mind fixates on incomplete emotional loops. Now apply that to relationships. When a man reveals just enough but not everything, he leaves an emotional loop open. She starts wondering, what else is there to him? What's he thinking when he goes quiet? Why does he feel so different from other men? That curiosity becomes emotional tension. And emotional tension, when rooted in authenticity, breeds obsession. But here's where most men slip. They confuse transparency with connection. So they start telling her everything too soon, every trauma, every secret, every doubt, hoping it builds trust. But real trust is not built through volume. It's built through timing. It's not how much you reveal, it's when you reveal it. And why? A Stoic man knows the difference. He doesn't overshare out of nervousness. He doesn't open his soul out of fear she'll lose interest. He holds his depth like a sacred flame, offering light slowly, not burning everything down at once. Because he understands. Mystery is not deception. It's discipline. It's choosing when to be seen, not needing to be seen all the time. This isn't about withholding love. It's about protecting the power of your story. If you've ever walked into a library and saw one book left half open on the table, tell me, don't you feel an urge to look inside? That's human nature. We are wired to pursue the unfinished, so if you always respond instantly, if you explain every mood shift, if you constantly make yourself available emotionally and physically, you remove the very thing that made you interesting in the first place. Let her sit in the unknown for a while. Let her wonder about you, not because you're cold, but because you're deep. Let her feel that you have layers, chapters she hasn't read yet. Because once she believes she's figured you out completely, the emotional hunger fades. But if she senses there's more to you, more that you're not rushing to reveal, she stays emotionally engaged. Not out of confusion, but curiosity. And curiosity is the first spark of deep attraction. You see, a Stoic man doesn't seek attention. He commands presence by how he carries himself, how he listens more than he speaks, how he lets silence do what words can't. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So what color are yours? Are your thoughts always needing to be known? Or are you comfortable in your inner world, even when no one else fully understands it yet? The man who is partially revealed leaves a mark. He doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to explain himself 5 different ways. He simply lives with such depth and grounded energy that people want to know more. That is the secret of obsession. Not through effort, but through essence. So ask yourself, are you over-explaining your soul to be liked? Or are you living in such a way that your silence makes her lean in? Because in the end, it's not about being loud. It's about being rare. And mystery, true, intentional, self-respecting mystery, is one of the rarest things a man can carry in today's noisy world. Let her discover you, slowly. Let her chase the meaning behind your calm. Let her fill in the spaces with imagination, because that's how she stays emotionally attached. Not because you gave her every answer, but because you gave her room to feel. And that feeling? That's where obsession begins. Part 4. Masculine calm breaks her walls. Let me share with you a truth that few men understand. But once you do, it will completely change how women respond to you. A woman doesn't feel safe through words. She feels safe through your energy, not through promises, not through explanations, not even through love letters or late-night texts. She feels emotionally safe, truly safe, when she senses the man in front of her is calm. Not fake calm, not the kind that's pretending, but the kind that's deeply rooted, still, present, unshakable, because women live in a world of emotion. Their minds move fast, their hearts feel deeply. At times their inner world is a storm. And when that emotional storm hits, she's not looking for a man to fix it. She's looking for a man who doesn't get swept away by it. She's looking for anchor energy. That's where your masculine calm becomes magnetic. Have you ever seen a woman test a man emotionally, push his buttons, get dramatic, challenge his mood, just to see how he reacts? It's not because she wants to fight. It's because she's craving to feel the boundaries of your emotional stability. She wants to know, can you hold your center when mine is shaking? And if you can, she melts. Not because you dominated her, not because you fixed her, but because you didn't lose yourself in the heat of her chaos. This is not weakness. This is mastery, the kind of mastery that the Stoics lived by. Stoicism was never about suppressing emotions. It was about learning how to respond, not react. It's the art of keeping your inner flame steady, even when the world throws wind in your face. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When a woman sees you live that truth, when she sees you breathe deeply instead of arguing, remain grounded instead of getting defensive, her walls begin to fall, because now she feels something rare. She feels that with you, she can be vulnerable. Not judged, not fixed, not told to calm down, but simply held, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. Let me tell you something from experience. You could have the perfect words. You could quote poetry. You could say everything she's ever wanted to hear. But if your nervous system is rattled, if your energy is frantic, if your mood shifts with hers, she won't feel safe. Because women don't follow logic, they follow feeling. And the feeling she's looking for is your calm presence. So how do you develop this kind of presence? You slow down. You breathe before you speak. You stop needing to win the conversation and instead start listening with your whole body. You learn to be still, especially when everything inside you wants to react. You let silence do what words can't. And in that stillness, something beautiful happens. She starts to soften. Her tension releases. Her defenses drop. Because she finally feels like she doesn't have to be strong all the time. She's been in survival mode for too long, emotionally guarded, mentally spinning, always protecting herself. And now, she can exhale. Not because you said something magical, but because you didn't need to. That's the paradox. The less you try to manage her emotions, the more trust you create. When you meet her chaos with clarity, when you meet her storm with stillness, you become the calm in her nervous system she didn't know she needed. And that's not something she'll forget. Now, this doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. Calm doesn't mean passive. Stillness doesn't mean weakness. It means you're so grounded in who you are that you don't let temporary emotions hijack your peace. That's masculine leadership. That's Stoic strength. It's the kind of energy that says, I can hold space for both your storm and my stillness. So let me ask you, when emotions run high in your relationship, do you meet them with breath or with battle? Do you add fire to the flame, or do you lower the heat by simply being present? Because when a woman finally finds a man whose calm doesn't break, even when she does, she begins to trust him in a way she's never trusted anyone before. Not because he tried to be her hero, but because he didn't abandon himself to earn her love. That kind of man. That kind of presence. It doesn't just attract her, it transforms her. Part 5. She bonds through earned intimacy. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood ideas in modern dating: emotional vulnerability. You've probably heard things like, women want men to open up more. You have to be emotionally available to build trust. And while there's truth in that, here's what most people don't tell you. Vulnerability without boundaries doesn't create connection. It creates confusion. Oversharing too quickly doesn't build intimacy. It kills it. Because real intimacy isn't just about how much you share. It's about who earns the right to be in that emotional space with you. Let's be honest. How many times have you opened up to someone too soon, hoping it would make her feel closer to you, only to feel a little emptier afterward? It's not because your story wasn't real. It's because it wasn't time yet. You see, when you give someone unrestricted access to your inner world before they've proven they can respect it, you're not being vulnerable. You're being insecure. And that's a hard truth we all have to face at some point. Stoic philosophy teaches us the value of temperance, the discipline of knowing when, how, and to what extent we reveal ourselves. It's not about hiding. It's about being intentional. Think of your emotional world like a fortress, not a prison, but a sacred place that protects what matters most: your values, your pain, your peace. Not everyone gets the key just because they're attractive. They have to earn their way in. That's where true bonding happens. A woman doesn't feel connected when you hand her everything too fast. She bonds through earned intimacy. When she slowly gets access to your deeper world, when she senses that you could open up at any moment, but choose to do so with discernment, that's what makes her feel chosen. It's that sense of, he doesn't open up to everyone, but he opened up to me. And when that happens, something beautiful unfolds. She respects you more. She feels seen in a deeper way. She wants to protect what you've shared, because she knows it wasn't just given, it was earned. Let me ask you, are you giving away emotional access just to feel close to someone? Or are you offering it with intention, after observing who's really worthy of it? Because when you set the bar high, not in a harsh way, but in a grounded, calm way, you don't push people away. You invite the right ones to lean in, and this is exactly where most men fall into a trap. They confuse being open with being available on demand. They share every hurt, every insecurity, every detail of their past in the name of honesty. But deep down, they're hoping for validation. Here's the truth. Validation is not intimacy. It's a short-term substitute that never satisfies. And a woman can feel the difference. When a man shares from a place of self-possession, it builds attraction. When he shares from a place of needing approval, it builds pressure. So how do you know the difference? Check your motive. If you're sharing to create closeness, connection, or comfort, pause. Ask yourself, have they earned this part of me yet? Because a king doesn't invite just anyone into the throne room. He protects the sacred spaces until he knows who's truly loyal. And that's not ego. That's emotional leadership. It's one of the most powerful forms of masculine strength, to remain calm, open-hearted, but measured, to offer vulnerability with discipline, to say with your presence, yes, I feel, yes, I have depth, but you must meet me there, not demand it before you've earned it. In a world obsessed with oversharing, with broadcasting pain for instant sympathy, Being selective with your emotional truth makes you rare. And rarity is attractive. Women crave a man who is real, but also rooted, who can open up, but doesn't unravel, who invites connection, but never sacrifices self-respect for it. That's the man she'll bond with, not because he gave her a window into his soul out of desperation, but because he let her in slowly, intentionally, like a man who knows his worth. That's what makes the emotional connection feel earned, and what's earned is valued. So the next time you're tempted to overshare, to open up too soon, to give too much in the name of being honest, breathe. Remember, your heart is a gift, not a strategy. Treat it like one. Part 6. Confidence without validation makes her chase. Let me say this clearly, because it might be the most powerful shift you ever make in your love life. The most magnetic kind of confidence is the one that doesn't need to be seen. You see, most men today are performing. They're performing for attention, for approval, for likes, for validation from women. Every text is crafted for effect. Every compliment is a bid for affection. Every outfit, every post, every reply, designed to be liked. But here's the truth. The more you perform, the more you silently say, "I'm not enough unless you notice me," and she can feel that. It's not the words you use, it's the energy underneath them. And when that energy is rooted in need, it doesn't pull her in, it pushes her away. Now flip the script. Think of the man who walks into a room and doesn't scan it to see who's watching him, because he's too busy being grounded in himself. He's not cold. He's not arrogant. He simply doesn't need attention to feel alive. That man, he becomes unforgettable, because there's a kind of peace around him, a kind of freedom, a quiet strength that says, "I'm good, with or without your applause." That's the kind of confidence that makes her chase. Not because he's playing games, not because he's withholding affection, but because his self-worth is non-negotiable, and that energy is rare. In a world where most men pedestal women, where they treat her as a prize to win, someone to impress, someone to convince, this kind of grounded presence stands out like fire in a dark room. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever liked someone so much that you slowly started losing yourself just to keep their attention? You changed your rhythm, you overthought your words. You abandoned your center just to stay in their orbit? We've all been there, but here's what you need to remember. The moment you place her above you is the moment she starts to feel beneath you. Because deep down, no woman wants to be idolized. She wants to be respected, to be seen clearly, not worshipped blindly. And most importantly, she wants a man who stands firm in his own value, not one who melts every time she pulls away. That's why confidence without craving becomes so attractive. Marcus Aurelius said, "It is in your power to retire into yourself whenever you choose." That's Stoic confidence, not loud, not boastful, but internal. It's the power to come home to yourself, especially when emotions are high, when rejection shows up, when people misunderstand you. Because when your peace comes from within, you stop being shaken by what's happening outside. That's the kind of man she chases, because he's not trying to prove anything. He doesn't need her to complete him. He doesn't need her reaction to validate him. And that makes him a mystery she wants to solve, not a project she wants to manage. Let me give you an image. Imagine two men. One constantly tries to impress her. He texts back in seconds. He compliments her every photo. He tries to be her dream guy, thinking that more effort equals more love. The other, he's present. He's kind, but he's full, with or without her. He replies when he feels aligned. He compliments her not because he's seeking a response, but because it's authentic. And when she pulls away, he doesn't chase, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows, my value doesn't drop just because your attention did. Now tell me, which one keeps her thinking? Which one triggers the chase? Not by pressure, but by presence. It's always the man who leads with quiet power. So, how do you cultivate this? You begin by recognizing that your worth is not a performance. You stop outsourcing your confidence to how she feels about you. You start building it from how you feel about yourself. You create a life so rich with purpose, growth, stillness, and clarity that love becomes an addition, not a rescue mission. You become a man who can walk away when something doesn't feel aligned, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. You look in the mirror and say, I choose peace over approval. I choose standards over validation. I choose presence over performance. And with that energy, you don't have to chase anyone, because the right people will find you irresistible. Part 7. Presence over performance wins. Let me ask you something simple, but powerful. When you're with a woman, are you really there? Or are you busy trying to be enough? Because here's the truth. In today's world, most men are caught in performance mode. They think they need the perfect story, the perfect response, the perfect posture, humor, charm, tone, everything tailored to impress. But here's the twist. The more you perform, the less present you become. And women can feel that. They might smile. They might say thank you. But deep down, they sense that your energy isn't truly with them. It's in your head. It's managing, calculating, reacting, not simply being. And that's why so many men get overlooked, despite trying so hard. But here's the good news. You don't need more lines. You don't need more moves. You need more presence. Presence is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't try to impress. It simply arrives, fully, calmly, completely. And in a world full of noise, a man who is fully present is unforgettable. Imagine this. You're on a date. One man leans in, overly eager. He fills every silence. He nods too often. His eyes dart around, looking for reactions. He's trying. Now imagine another man. He listens without rushing to speak. He doesn't interrupt the silence. He respects it. He makes her feel seen, not because he's putting on a show, but because he's there, not chasing the next moment, not worrying how he's being perceived, but grounded, calm. Intentional. That man, he wins without effort. Because presence is not passive, it's powerful. It says, I don't need to be more than I am right now. I don't need your approval to feel whole. It's the ultimate form of masculine energy, stillness in motion. And it's exactly what Stoic philosophy has taught for centuries. Seneca said, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. You see, when you're constantly trying to create an outcome, whether it's attraction, validation, or connection, you're no longer in the present. You've left the moment, and the woman in front of you can feel it. But when you drop the act, when you stop trying to be liked and start being real, you unlock something rare. You become safe, grounded, magnetic, because women don't fall in love with the man who performs. They fall in love with the man who makes them feel fully seen. And you can't see anyone clearly if you're stuck in your own self-doubt. So how do you practice presence? Start with the breath. Before you speak, pause. Before you reply, listen. Before you prove yourself, ask if proving is even necessary. Instead of thinking about what to say next, ask yourself, what is she really feeling right now? This is emotional presence. It's not just being physically close. It's being energetically close. It's the ability to sit across from someone and say more with your calm than with your words. When you master this, you stop trying to control the moment, and you start experiencing it, and that's where connection lives. Not in the perfect sentence, not in the best story, but in the space where two people actually show up. So if you've been trying too hard, if you've been overthinking your words, your actions, your moves, let it go. You don't have to perform to be powerful, because your greatest strength is not in how much you can impress. It's in how deeply you can be. Presence over performance, every single time. And when you live from that space, something amazing happens. People start remembering you, not because you tried to stand out, but because your energy made them feel safe, seen, and inspired to be more present themselves. That is rare. And rare is unforgettable. Part 8. Silence is more powerful than persuasion. Let's end with a lesson that almost every man learns the hard way. When emotions run high, silence is stronger than speech, especially in love. You see, when a woman pulls away, when she's uncertain, distant, or even testing you emotionally, most men go straight into panic mode. They chase. They explain. They beg. They send paragraph-long texts, trying to persuade her of their worth, their love, their loyalty. But here's the truth. The more you try to convince her with words, the more she loses respect. Why? Because chasing with words exposes need. It reveals emotional instability. It tells her, I need you to choose me so I can feel okay with myself. And nothing kills attraction faster than a man who abandons his inner ground just to win someone else's approval. But silence says everything. Silence says, I'm grounded even if you're unsure. I don't need this situation to define me. I'm not here to persuade you. I'm here to live in truth. That's the kind of presence that shakes people in the best way. Because it's rare. Most people react. Most people talk to relieve anxiety. Most people try to fix what isn't theirs to fix, but the Stoic man, he waits. He watches. He responds, if and when it's necessary. He knows that sometimes saying nothing is the highest expression of confidence. Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And how do you react when she becomes distant? That's the test. You could beg. You could explain. You could try to argue your worth. Or you could sit in the stillness of your self-respect. You could let her feel your absence. You could let silence speak louder than any scripted line. Because here's the paradox. When you stop trying to prove your value, she begins to feel it. The man who walks away silently, not in bitterness, not in arrogance, but in inner peace, becomes unforgettable. Not because he forced her to see his worth, but because he respected himself enough to let go when persuasion no longer served the moment. Let me ask you this. When was the last time your silence changed the entire energy of a room? When was the last time you didn't explain yourself, and it made someone respect you more? That's the power we often forget. Restraint. It's not silence rooted in fear. It's silence rooted in emotional discipline. And that's the final Stoic lesson I want you to hold on to. Respond. Don't react. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't have to explain your every move. And you sure as hell don't need to argue for your value. Value, when lived, not shouted, becomes obvious. So the next time she withdraws, the next time the tension rises, the next time you feel the urge to type a long emotional message or chase her down with explanations, pause, breathe, and choose stillness. Let her feel what it's like when your energy is no longer available. Let her wonder. Let the silence stretch. because in that space, something powerful happens. She has a chance to miss you, to sit with the weight of your absence. And if what you had was real, if your energy was strong and your presence was calm, she'll feel it more now than ever before. You don't have to persuade her. You just have to be the man who doesn't flinch when silence enters the room. That's what sets you apart. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's stoic. And that's powerful. Part 9. Standards. Trigger desire. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood sources of male power. Standards. Not preferences. Not conditions. But personal standards, the non-negotiable lines that define who you are and how you allow others to treat you. Because here's the truth. A man's standards are where his spine lives. They're not about control. They're not about ego. They're about identity. And in a world where many men fold the moment tension arises, where they bend to keep her interested, say yes when they feel no, tolerate what doesn't feel right, just to avoid losing her. The man who calmly says, "That doesn't work for me," without drama, without threat, without fear. That man, he earns both respect and desire. You see, a woman may test your boundaries. She may poke at your values. She may cross a line to see what you're made of, not because she's cruel, but because she's searching for your center. She wants to feel the edge of your self-respect. She wants to know there's something in you that doesn't shake, no matter how beautiful she is, no matter how badly you want her. And when she finds that edge, she leans in, not because you controlled her, but because you controlled yourself. That's stoic power. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, then adorn yourself accordingly." In other words, don't build your identity around someone else's desires. Know who you are. Define your code. Live by it. And if someone doesn't align, you don't fight. You don't chase. You simply walk. And that walk-away energy, that quiet, grounded refusal to betray your standards, it's one of the most attractive things a man can embody. Think about it. When was the last time you truly respected someone who had no boundaries, who agreed with everything you said, who never challenged you? Who bent every time you applied pressure? Exactly. Now flip it. Think of someone who was calm, kind, but firm, who told you the truth even if it was uncomfortable, who didn't raise their voice, but also didn't budge. That kind of person leaves an impression, because strength in silence is louder than weakness in words. So why do so many men abandon their standards? Because they're afraid. Afraid of losing her. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of not being enough, unless they prove it through tolerance and sacrifice. But here's the harsh truth. Every time you lower your standard to keep her, you lower her attraction to you. Not because she's mean, but because your energy becomes insecure. And insecurity repels. What draws her in is knowing this man won't betray himself, not even for me. That's leadership. That's maturity. That's what makes her lean forward and take you seriously, not just as a partner, but as a presence. And it's not about being rigid. It's about being rooted. A man with standards doesn't need to be aggressive. He doesn't yell. He doesn't shame. He doesn't issue ultimatums. He simply lives by his truth. If he says, "I don't tolerate disrespect," he means it, not as a threat, but as a quiet boundary. If he says, "I value honesty," he walks away when deception shows up. No performance, no persuasion, just presence. And that presence becomes a mirror. Because when you live with integrity, it challenges others to rise or walk. And either outcome is a win, because you're no longer in relationships out of fear. You're in them from alignment, and that's where true desire is born. Not from desperation, not from need, but from standing tall in who you are. So let me ask you, where in your life have you been folding? Where have you been saying yes when your soul whispered no? Where have you allowed disrespect to stay just to avoid the discomfort of walking away? Because the moment you stop betraying yourself is the moment everything begins to shift. You stop chasing, you stop proving, you start attracting, not because of how loud you are, but because of how anchored you are. A man with standards doesn't chase love, he draws it. He doesn't need to be chosen because he's already chosen himself. And that kind of man, he's rare. And in a world starving for authenticity and strength, rarity is irresistible. Part 10. She falls hardest for the man who can walk away. Let's end with one of the most counterintuitive truths in love. The man she falls hardest for is the one who can walk away. Not the one who begs, not the one who proves himself endlessly, not the one who stays no matter how he's treated, but the man who, without anger, without games, without drama, can leave if staying means betraying himself. That kind of man, he's unforgettable, because here's what most people miss. Power in relationships doesn't come from control, it comes from detachment. Not coldness, not emotional distance, but freedom. The ability to choose love without needing it to survive. The moment you show a woman that you're willing to walk away if your peace, your purpose, or your self-respect is at stake, you shift the dynamic forever. Because most men chase, they stay when they shouldn't. They tolerate disrespect. They over-explain, over-pursue, and overextend just to hold on. But she doesn't fall for the man who needs her. She falls for the one who wants her, but doesn't depend on her. That's a different frequency. That's when desire becomes deeper, stronger, even addictive. Because now, she's not your emotional oxygen. She's not the reason you get up in the morning. She's not your source. She's your addition. That energy is rare, and it's rooted in Stoic mastery. Seneca once said, "It's not the man who has too little, but the one who craves more, who is poor." Let that sink in. Neediness is poverty. Craving someone to complete you is emotional poverty. But when you're full from within, when your heart, your habits, your mission, and your mindset are already complete, you become magnetic. Because you've stopped chasing. You're no longer asking, "How can I make her stay?" You're asking, "Is this connection aligned with who I've become?" And if it's not, you walk. Not to hurt her, not to prove a point, but because you respect yourself too much to stay small. That's the moment she feels it. The pull, the shift, the weight of your absence. Because now, you're not playing by her emotions. You're anchored in your principles. You see, every time you choose yourself over approval, every time you hold your boundary instead of bending to keep the peace, every time you walk away from what drains your strength, you send a silent but powerful message. I am not afraid to lose what costs me myself. That's what she remembers. That's what stirs something in her, that no gift, no message, no performance ever could. Because that energy isn't taught in romance novels. It's felt in your presence. A man who can walk away is a man who never had to beg in the first place. And here's what's wild. The moment you become willing to walk away is often the moment she finally leans in. Because now she sees you clearly, not as a puppet to her moods, but as a man of depth, clarity, and emotional sovereignty. Let me ask you, are you in relationships where you shrink just to stay? Have you stayed too long where you weren't valued? Have you ever poured all of yourself into someone who wouldn't even meet you halfway? Because you were too afraid to lose them? If so, you're not alone. But that season can end today. You reclaim your power the moment you realize you can love fully and still walk away when needed. You can be kind, committed, and generous without being a doormat. You can give someone your heart without giving away your spine. So if she pulls away, don't panic. Don't chase. Don't argue for your worth. Stand still. Stay calm. And let her feel the weight of a man who doesn't beg. Because the deepest emotional pull is created when she senses, this man loves me, but he'll never need me to love himself. And that kind of man, he's not just rare, he's unforgettable. So after everything we've unpacked, presence, mystery, calm, emotional discipline, self-respect, let's bring it all home with one final truth. She doesn't fall for the loudest man in the room. She falls for the man who knows exactly who he is without needing to prove it. Not the one who performs, not the one who convinces, but the one who leads. The man who leads not with control, but with presence, not with manipulation, but with standards, not with desperation, but with self-respect. You see, most men chase because they're trying to earn love. They think if they just say the right thing, show the right side of themselves, give enough affection, enough validation, enough attention, then maybe, just maybe, she'll stay. But chasing always comes from fear. And fear is not attractive. Fear says, you are the prize. I hope I'm good enough. But when you lead from a place of clarity, calm, and strength, you don't ask to be chosen. You choose yourself first. And from that wholeness, you invite others in, not to complete you, but to walk alongside you. That's not a tactic. That's not a trick. That's a shift from performance to power, from chasing approval to living in alignment. And here's the beauty of it all. When you stop trying to get her attention, when you stop performing for love, when you stop folding your truth just to keep someone around, you start building a life so full, so meaningful, so rooted in purpose, that she naturally wants to be part of it. Not because you asked her to, not because you chased, but because your presence speaks louder than any performance ever could. Let me leave you with a challenge. Instead of chasing her, chase mastery. Chase emotional control. Chase purpose. Chase a life that lights you up from the inside. Because when you live like that, when your daily habits, your mindset, and your relationships reflect strength and serenity, you become the man she didn't even know she was waiting for. Not because you tried to be him, but because you stopped trying to be anything else. That's stoicism in action. That's what it means to lead. So next time you feel the urge to prove yourself, pause. Next time you want to chase, breathe. Next time you wonder if you're doing enough to make her stay, ask yourself, am I performing or am I leading? Because at the end of the day, real attraction isn't something you force. It's something you become. And the man who leads, not with noise, but with depth, not with pressure, but with presence, not with need, but with truth. That man doesn't just attract love, he inspires it. If this message resonated with you, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and become part of a community that's not here to chase, but to lead. And drop a comment below. Which part of this message hit you the hardest? I read every one, and your story might just be the spark that helps someone else find their strength too. Thanks for being here. Now go live like the man you were meant to be. We'll see you in the next video.